Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome to a brand new video. This is library chat number 2, home library chat number 2. In today's video, I'd like to share with you some of the literatures that is excellent for you to critically research on the history of Christianity. And so the history of Christianity is something that you can view from two sides. And that is from a historical, social historical side, as well as from a theological side. Now, from the theological perspective, people would say that the book of Acts is actually historical. It shows the first era or the first century as to how Christianity spread after Jesus, quote unquote Christianity. Whereas if you look at things from a social historical perspective, using modern historiographical methods, a lot of scholars actually doubt the accounts in the book of Acts, especially when you compare the Pauline epistles, the authentic Pauline epistles, to the book of Acts. It shows a very contrasting account. For example, did Paul go into the synagogues, as the book of Acts, to preach to the Jews first, and then the Jews do not want to listen to the message of Paul, and so he moved on to the next. He moved on to the Gentiles. Whereas if we look at the Pauline epistles, the authentic Pauline epistles, Paul never mentioned that he went to the synagogues to preach to the Jews first. Instead, he actually went and set up shop. For example, in Corinth, he went and set up shop and he preached to those people who actually come to his shop. A lot of scholars, theological scholars, they have harmonized the two accounts, whereby they say that Paul also go to the synagogues and he also preached to those who actually come to his shop. And so from a theological perspective, the scholars, the Christian scholars over the years, they have actually harmonized the account in the book of Acts as well as the Pauline epistles. Whereas modern scholars tend to look at the book of Acts separately and the Pauline epistles separately, and they don't harmonize their account because, for example, the book of Acts mentioned a different thing. And if the book of Acts, the author of the book of Acts, actually knew that Paul actually preached to those who came to his shop, he would not have mentioned a different story whereby Paul actually preached to the Jews first in synagogues. And so there are a lot of back and forth here between those who took the theological perspective as well as those who actually took the social historical perspective. And so it's a different kind of methodology that you use. And if you want to know which account is the truth, then obviously you have to criticize the methodologies that are being used. So either way, with that being said, there's a very good book here called Resetting the Origins of Christianity by Marcus Vincent. And the author here actually mentioned that it wasn't until the time of Irenaeus, around the time of Irenaeus, that the book of Acts was actually well known. Okay. In fact, if you look at all the other acts of all the other early acts, right, it doesn't reference the book of Acts, Acts of the Apostles. And the first person that actually so-called made the book of Acts popular is actually Irenaeus of Lyon. Whereas earlier on, the book of Acts wasn't even quoted by any of the early writings of the church fathers. And this is different when you compare it to the different kinds of gospels. For example, the Gospels of the Nazarenes quotes from Matthew, and the Gospel of Thomas quotes from the Gospels that are currently in the New Testament, and so on and so forth. Gospel of Peter also have some quotations or some inferences from the Gospel of Matthew, so on and so forth. But the early Acts of Thecla, Paul and Thecla, the epistles of the apostles, so on and so forth, they never actually quote anything from the book of Acts. And so it depends on how you take, or depends on how you want to take this knowledge or this information. But when we do historical perspective, when we look at things from a social historical perspective, applying modern concept of historiography, this information is actually very prominent to us in order for us to understand the origins of Christianity. So can the accounts in the book of Acts be believed? Or should we doubt the accounts of the book of Acts when it comes to the origin of Christianity? Did the early church, so-called church, spread as per what the book of Acts actually mentioned? Or was it something else that happened? And then the book of Acts kind of want to portray a good image of the origins of Christianity. There are two ways to look at this, as I've mentioned before. If you look at things from a social historical perspective, especially if you take into consideration the book of James, the Pauline epistles, authentic Pauline epistles, as well as the literatures surrounding the canonical works that are currently in the New Testament at the moment, you can see that it seems the book of Acts is trying to portray a unified beginning of Christianity, whereas the book of Paul, the epistles of Paul, the authentic Pauline epistles, as well as the non-authentic Pauline epistles, you kind of see a tension between Jews and the early Christians, and this is found in the gospel, especially the gospel of John as well. It's not anti-Semitic. Anti-Semitism is a modern phenomenon, and Emile Gilles Levine has actually dismissed this. And so when the author of John, whoever he may be, if you take a theological perspective, there will be John the son of Zebedee. But if you take a modern historical perspective, all the Gospels are anonymous. The attribution to the Gospels came much later on by Irenaeus of Lyon. And so, especially the book of John, whereby it contains passages that really so-called abuse the Jews verbally. And so it shows a tension between the early Christians and the Jews. And this is found in the gospel as well, especially the gospel of Matthew, whereby the author had Pilate washes his hands, right? And he puts it in the mouth of the Jews, whereby the blood of Jesus be on us and our children. And so there's a tension here between Judaism of the time, the Jews of the time, as well as the early Christians. Now, what do we make of it? Right? And so scholars have, over the years, over the millennium actually, not over the millennium, scholars have written really disgusting stuff that actually creates all this, that actually persecuted the Jews, allowed for the Jews to be persecuted, so on and so forth. Throughout the Middle Ages, they were, abandoned, they were kicked out of Europe, and so they had to abandon their homes, their villages, and everything that they have built. They moved all the way across to the Eastern Europe, so on and so forth. And we can see that from the revolt, the Simon Bar Kokhba revolt, Jews were actually not allowed to enter Jerusalem, the Holy Land, anymore. And also throughout the Middle Ages, the Talmud were being burned by the church, and so on and so forth. And so all these actually led to the tension that we have today, but that's a different story. So anyway, the beginning of Christianity seems to be that all the other literature surrounding the book of Acts portrays a different kind of history compared to the book of Acts, whereby it shows that Christians and Jews were unified, so on and so forth. Now, even that can be challenged. And some scholars have challenged the idea whereby the book of Acts of the Apostle, actually try to portray a unified beginning or origin of Christianity between the Jews and the Christians, right? And so, either way, let me recommend some literatures. And so, Resetting the Origins of Christianity, this is a translation of the German by the same author, right? Published in 2023 by Cambridge University Press, but was actually published in 2019 by in German. Now, Another literature for you to understand the world Christians, and this is the book, The World Christians. This actually shows how it emerged. For example, what is the 3 or 4 major denominations of Christianity, and where do these people actually come from? What is the theology of the Eastern Orthodox Church? And what is the difference between the theology of the Eastern Orthodox Church as compared to Catholicism, Protestantism, and Pentecostalism? So this is a really great reference, a really great work, right? And so this is very helpful for the Muslims as well, because you have to know the people that you are engaging with, right? For example, if you engage with a Christian, or even a Christian engaging with a Christian, or a Mormon engaging with a Christian, or whoever you may be, when you engage with the people that you're engaging with, for example, if I engage with another Muslim, right, the person can be a Sunni Muslim, can be a Shia, can be a Sufi, right? But even within Shiism and Sufism, there are many different strands. For example, in Sufism, you have the Deobandis, Naqshbandis, Barelwis, right? And within the Shi'i school of thought, you have Ismailism, right? You have the Twelvers, and so you have the Zaydis. And so you have these all different strata, different denominations or sub-denominations of Christianity. And also the different theological school within Sunnism as well. And so, for example, some people have followed different mazhab, they do this, they do that. And so even though you do not really engage with people at that level on the streets, right? But if you want to, you can go deeper and have a more fruitful conversation. So once you know the different denominations that these people are actually in, it's much easier for you to actually focus on the point of disputes. And so the conversation doesn't have to be so long. You prevent yourself from going in circles, right? Because you already know, if, for example, if I engage with an Ismailis, I basically can already address the very core principle, right? And that is for the way they make salah, they don't face the Qibla, right? They don't pray in the masjid, right? So we can engage with people at that level, not only from a theological perspective, but you can also engage from a historical perspective, because it turns out that a lot of people don't know the history. For example, a lot of Ismailis don't know the history, the origins of Ismailism, right? And so once you engage with them about the history, once you educate them and educate yourself at the same time, right, remind yourself, then people will be shocked. They will be more inclined to listen to what you have to say. And obviously you have to say something that is true. You have to bring your dalil, you have to bring your evidence, right? And so this is a literature that I feel that is important for anyone who wants to have a fruitful conversation and dialogue with their Christian friends. Now, the final book that I would actually recommend, right, if you want to study the Christianity, if you want to study the origins of Christianity, there are also a lot of other literatures that can actually, in fact, actually support it or will provide you a background context as to not only the New Testament literatures that you read. So, Ancient Texts for New Testament Studies. This is by Craig Evans. This is published by Baker Academic. Right? This gives you a great excerpts or insights into some of the background literatures. Right? A lot of these are just introduction to the literatures. He doesn't necessarily quote you the entire work, but these are informations that are great and will be useful for you, because especially if you want to research on the origins of Christianity, or the first and second century? Is there a tension? How did Christians engage with one another? And where did Christianity even came from? Did it come from Judaism? Or did it come from Paul, the Gentile Christians? Right? And so there are a lot of works, and also you have the, for example, like I mentioned earlier, you have the works of the rabbis. Okay, the rabbis are also writing books. Right? Now there are also some disputes that I have with regards to this book. Okay, because some of the quotations are actually, for example, the rabbis. Okay, the works that the rabbis wrote in the early centuries. The author here is trying to imply that there's some sort of copying done from the rabbis with the New Testament, right? Even though the author here mentions Jesus's sayings, but Jesus never say anything. It is all quotations of Jesus, because we don't have any writings that is written by Jesus. Right? And so all these are attributions to whatever Jesus spoke, as informed us by the Gospels. And so we have to take things with a pinch of salt, right? Because if you say that Jesus actually spoke exactly what the New Testament Gospels quoted him, then where is the evidence? Because we do not have whatever Jesus spoke. And so, so I just want to read to you the content here, because it has works by Philos of Alexandria, which will be helpful for you to know the first century context. Okay, and so you have the writings of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yeah, you have versions of the Old Testament. You have Philo and Josephus, which are very important, because especially Josephus mentions something about Jesus, but a lot of scholars believe that this is actually an interpolation. Okay, and so because Josephus was a Jew, it is very highly doubted that if Josephus remains a Jew and he did not become a Christian, then there's no way in the world that Josephus actually acknowledged Jesus as the Messiah, as the Christ. Okay, then you have the Targums. Okay, and then you have rabbinic literatures, and then you have the early writings of the early church fathers, the New Testament Apocrypha and Pseudepigrapha, okay, writings attributed to the apostles. And then you have also other Greco-Roman writings, the Samaritan writings, and then also examples of New Testament exegesis. Okay, and so this is a very important works. Well, it is actually a compendium or introduction to different literatures that are out there. Now, where do you actually find, if you do not have access to literatures, where do you actually find all these writings of the early church fathers? So, for example, right, if I have here the New Testament and other early Christian writings compiled by Professor Ehrman, right, but if you do not have or you can't afford to have these literatures, where do you actually go and read all these literatures? Well, the answer is online. Thanks to modern technology, a lot of resources have been put online, and so it doesn't actually impair your learning at all, because all these literatures are online for free. I'll not tell you where to get it, obviously, because I don't support piracy, but if you want to, you can find it online, and it's for free. Now, even commentaries are online now, and a lot of the literatures that I am showing you, if you want to buy them, you can actually buy them via digital book, and they're much cheaper. right? But you do not need to have a home library. You do not need to have a wall full of books in order for you to actually learn about the origins of Christianity or learn about anything, basically, right? Well, there are certain things whereby you can't actually find online, but you can supplement it via educational videos on YouTube, right? And I don't mean my channel, because my channel is just sharing of knowledge, sharing of information. I'm not teaching you, okay? So it's just sharing of knowledge. You certainly shouldn't be learning from me, and you should be learning from scholars, right? And so, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this video actually helps you. I'm researching about something interesting at the moment as well, and also I'm researching about the different denominations of Christianity, right? And so this book serves as a textbook for me. Well, it is actually a textbook, but nevertheless, I'll see you in my next video. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.